It's been a while since my last video and Chinese EV stocks are going through the roof. So I guess it's time to talk not only about Tesla and NIO, but also about Li Auto and Xiaopeng, and I will do that in this video. So in general, we're seeing two things. Number one is that investors in general are aligning more money to EVs. So we see that a couple of EV startups are now outcompeting the traditional legacy autos in market capitalization. And second of all, people are really starting to look towards China and what is happening there. And unfortunately for the Tesla bulls, and I'm one of those, there hasn't been much happening for Tesla stock recently. So let's take a closer look regarding, is this all going in the right direction and is the capital aligned the way it should be, or should we actually question that? The last couple of days I've been extremely busy with doing some of the background research regarding those topics, but I kept my patrons updated on stuff that has been going on. So if you want more frequent updates as well, just consider to become one of the patrons as well. Now, before we start, I want to put out a small reminder here and also a little bit of a warning that what is currently happening in the market is really extraordinary, and we see lots of revaluation happening, particularly to the Chinese EV companies, as mentioned before. And I see lots of comments out there of people taking out loans and gambling here. And I want to tell you that I don't want to have anything to do with that. I'm not endorsing that kind of trading because this is, in my point of view, it's not investing. People oftentimes have no idea what's happening, what they're investing in, and they're just gambling on missing out this train and the fear of missing out and so on. So yes, it's great times if you invested in Chinese EV stocks in general, but be careful, the markets can be brutal, so don't make anything stupid here. So with that, let's jump into the earnings of Xiaopeng. And as you know, personally, I have no position in Xiaopeng. I mentioned that I think that they will be doing well over time, but personally for me, it's not an investment at this point in time. But nonetheless, I'm obviously looking at what they are reporting and in general to get a feeling about the EV industry in China and how it's progressing. So yesterday, their earnings have been a big catalyst for EV stocks in general, and of course they made a huge gain based on those earnings. However, I do think that the earnings weren't actually that good, to be honest, especially when we look at the guidance. So first of all, I already tweeted days ago and weeks ago that I think that Xiaopeng will actually manage to report positive vehicle margins, and actually they did. So this is good news, and also they were beating the revenue estimates, but they missed on the earnings per share, so they increased actually the losses, and this was a miss in the earnings. And yesterday I was also listening to the earnings call, and what really caught my attention here was the guidance for Q4. And whereas like Wall Street seems to be really happy about the beat in the revenues and the guidance they gave, I was actually a little bit worried about what they were saying here. So they mentioned that they will be aiming to deliver about 10,000 vehicles in Q4 2020. And as we already know, the October deliveries around 3,000 cars. I'm guessing that in November they will slightly up it to 3,300 and then 3,800 in December, which in total will be round about the 10,000 that they are guiding for. Now, this guidance wasn't particularly bullish in my point of view. It's only a 20% increase quarter on quarter, and this in contrast that Xpeng was growing more than 100% quarter on quarter in the quarters before, and also in relation to what Tesla and NIO are actually aiming for. I think this shows that they are currently a little bit in trouble here with ramping the capacity. So for instance, let this compare with Tesla, and Tesla, they are really ramping production like crazy. They are the king of scale here, and it's interesting to see that this fact has been widely going unnoticed here. If you look at the share price, which is kind of just going sideways here in comparison to those Chinese EV stocks, and I think most analysts maybe caught this wrong or haven't priced that into the stock price yet. But there's news that Tesla has produced more than 22,000 cars at Giga Shanghai, and this is a large production ramp in comparison to September, where they produced around 15,000 cars. Of course, around 7,000 of those cars that I have produced will actually go to Europe now, so there will be maybe only 15,000 or 16,000 delivered within China. And always be careful, production is not equal to the actual deliveries. but this shows you how big Tesla is actually scaling and ramping here. And this is really tremendous to see how fast they are actually delivering on their targets here. So I think it's likely that in November they can deliver more than 16,000 vehicles, and in December maybe 19,000 vehicles in total, bringing it up to more than 50,000 vehicles that are delivered in China in Q4, according to my personal estimations here. And this would reflect in a quarter-on-quarter growth for Tesla of 37%. I think it could actually go even higher, more towards 40%. And this in comparison to how Xiaopeng is currently ramping at a much tinier absolute number, is telling a lot about how incredible Tesla is doing here. Now let's also look at NIO here, because next week, of course, the earnings are coming up, and in October, NIO has produced more than 5,000 cars and delivered them slightly more. And we also have some news about NIO President Jin Lihong, who said they are already in November switching to a double shift, as they have maxed out the production capacity of the single shift, which doesn't mean that we initially already get the 10 to 12,000 monthly production that they can enable with a double shift. However, my estimations for NIO here are that they can deliver more than 5,500 cars in November and 6,000 in December. It's actually more conservative estimation here, and that would bring NIO to a on-par growth with Tesla here, also growing 36% quarter on quarter with a nice and steady growth. So I was summing this up here on this chart, where you can see that both NIO and Tesla have this kind of exponential growth curve. If you look at the trend line here, with similar growth rates in the Q4, and in contrary to that, with the guidance of Xiaopeng, so far it seems like they're currently maxed out on this 3,500 monthly production here. And I do think that at some point they will get rid of that. I think they're already working on increasing the capacity and so on. But to me, in general, if it comes to Q4, and also having in mind that Q1 and Q2 is usually a weak quarter for auto sales, that rings a little bit of an alarm bell here for me regarding the earnings of Xiaopeng. And I cannot agree that this has been a great forecast here. On the contrary, of course, we also need to see first how NIO can actually guide with their earnings, and also what they will be reporting for Q3. I will be making a Patreon post about my personal estimations on that, and also will be making a separate video on that coming before the earnings. The company that I don't have on this chart, which is Li Auto, is also reporting earnings today, and they're not on this chart because it's not a pure EV car, so it's like investing in a plug-in hybrid in my point of view. So I'm personally also not invested in this company, but the earnings press release that Li Auto has put out there, in my point of view, is looking much better than what Xiaopeng has reported yesterday. So for instance, the vehicle margin is approaching almost 20% in the third quarter, which is great news, I think, for the investors. They have just a tiny loss of or net loss here of 15.7 million, with a cash balance of more than 2 billion. So that's really also really good here. And also their guidance between 11,000 and 12,000, so I have it here, and in the middle is actually more bullish than what Xiaopeng has put out there. So I think Li Auto can actually deliver around 3,800 cars in November, and in December 4,200 cars. So that would put them also at a similar quarter-on-quarter growth rate to NIO and Tesla here. So in comparison, this looks more solid here to Xpeng here. But for me, again, the deal breaker here is that this is not an EV company. And this actually brings me back to the bigger picture here, why I'm invested in NIO and Tesla primarily, because those companies, in my point of view, have this enormous potential in the future to grow even further. So I'm sharing here some work that I'm doing in the background during this week, actually looking at the different revenue streams that I think NIO can tap into, and trying to quantify them, quantify the market for it, but also quantifying of how much NIO can actually tap into this market, and how this will look as a revenue stream here over time. And of course, we're currently here at the very beginning, 2020 year one, and the current NIO valuation is kind of based on the year 5 and 6 out by the investors, like the price targets of JP Morgan and so on, because they are seeing this big potential of NIO actually ramping their production of the cars. But I'm looking further than that. I'm looking also at different other revenue streams and also to where they can be actually in 2030. So much further out there. And I think this is a unique thing for NIO and also Tesla, that they can actually tap in those different revenue streams. And I will be sharing it in detail, what this actually means in a quantifiable way, what this actually means on a valuation basis, first with my patrons and then later on in a series of videos here on the channel. Okay, so far on the update on the earnings season from Li Auto and Xiaopeng, and also my thoughts about the guidance of Tesla and NIO. More videos on that coming up during the next few days. But also as a reminder, be careful. The markets can drop, for instance, if we see a rise of the COVID cases in the US and maybe lockdowns announced. I'm not saying that this should happen. I think this is just a possibility that it can happen. So be prepared for it. Don't take out loans and make some stupid trades. Invest in the future in a 5 to 10 years outlook. I think this way it's more safe and it makes more sense to invest in something that you understand. And I hope I can bring you this information that you can understand your investments or the companies better, and then you can decide for yourself. As always, not investment advice from my side here. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great weekend and see you in the next one.